Unless you're new to video games, it's very hard to not know what Hollow Knight is. It's a Metroidvania masterpiece that was created by Team Cherry. I beat the game myself years ago, and I thought it was excellent. Some of the bosses were insanely hard, and the Dark Souls influence felt throughout Hollow Knight was a really good recipe that made for, honestly, one of the best original games I played in years. Hollow Knight also has a massive community, lore heads and people who speedrun the game all the time, and celebrate just about everything they love about the series. But now with Silksong approaching, it's making me question the industry as a whole. And that what we're witnessing right now with Silksong is the power of what a truly generational game can do once it finally cements itself and firmly declares that it's ready to be played. And then, beyond this, I want to also look at the Switch too, and how certain ports are not shaping up based on player feedback, and how this all loops back together with Silksong, and how maybe games like Silksong could maybe even usher in a new era for video games as a whole. But firstly, from GameSpot. Silksong release date has already prompted multiple game delays. Like I said, when a generational game comes out, it will cause others in the industry to run away, not necessarily in fear, but more so in respect. Silksong is coming out September 4th, 2025, after years of development and silence on Team Cherry's part. They finally announced at Gamescom this year that the game would be coming out, and very soon too. And I wish more games announced themselves and released soon after like this, because that's actually awesome. But it's great that people finally have the ability to play Silksong after waiting so long. But due to all of this, other games are now running for the hills. Games like Clover Pit, as seen here, was originally coming out September 3rd. Now, they're delaying to September 26th due to Silksong releasing so close to it. Another game that immediately announced a big delay was Phaland, which was set to have its big 1.0 launch. But Silksong dropping caused this game to also steer clear of their release window as well. As Phaland's developer said, this wasn't an easy decision. We poured years of work and love into Phaland, and we want to make sure it arrives at a time when it can receive the attention and care it deserves. A new release date will be announced very soon. Kind of insane to think that another game can cause such a mass exodus of other games around it so quickly, but frankly, that is the power of Hollow Knight as a series. And also, in case you don't know, Silksong is currently the most wishlisted game on Steam, and I'm not lying. I mean, it beat out even Battlefield 6 if you can believe it. As seen here, Silksong has almost 5 million wishlists on Steam alone, which is actually crazy. It completely eclipses Battlefield 6, which is in second place, and that one's sitting at around 2.8 million or so wishlists right now, which just tells you how massive of a release Silksong is going to be. I know there will be some who haven't played Hollow Knight before that are watching this and looking at this game or the previous one in action and going, really? Why are people so obsessed with this series? What you need to realize is that Hollow Knight is a phenomenon that completely took over the indie space, as well as just influenced games far bigger than even it due to how good it was. I said once in a video years back that if Castlevania Symphony of the Night was the beginning of the RPG-like structure within a Castlevania-like game, which would then inevitably lead to games like Dark Souls existing, which is just Symphony of the Night but in 3D essentially, I mean it is. Hollow Knight is the next natural evolution of both of those games combined if they got fused with like Super Mario in terms of platforming. And by the way, if you enjoy the content, consider liking the video, subscribing, leaving a comment, thank you, but it's also hard to explain how good Hollow Knight is if you haven't played it, but the game just feels, how do I put it, natural, if that makes sense. You know when you played Super Mario, the jumping and the running and such, just, it felt second nature to you even if you really hadn't played it before? Like, it just made sense when you played, as if the animations and the feedback of controls are just an extension of what you would do normally anyways? That's how Hollow Knight feels like to play too. Imagine you're playing Super Mario, but everyone is bugs, the bosses are pretty much Dark Souls enemies, and you're able to jump around and bounce on things like you're playing Shovel Knight. There's very few games where I would use the word perfect to explain how they play, but Hollow Knight is definitely one of those games. It is so polished to a shine that it's actually crazy, as if you really wouldn't add anything to it, because it just works so well. And the release date of Silksong has now made the original game yet again explode in popularity, as seen here. Hollow Knight's player counts have hit an all-time peak around 39,000 players on Steam recently, which is crazy good for a game of this size and price, because if you also don't know, Hollow Knight is nowhere near a full-price game. Despite having more meaningful content than most AAA releases from the past 8 years and taking like 40 hours to complete just the base game alone pretty much, in Canada anyway, Hollow Knight retails for not even $20. It's like $15 in America right now. Yeah, I know, it costs next to nothing, yet it delivers one of the best platforming action adventures you can ever play right now. Seriously, if you somehow haven't played Hollow Knight yourself, you should. It's a game that deserves all the praise it gets and then some. And if you love Souls-likes especially, which I know many in my audience do, you will absolutely love Hollow Knight, trust me. You can't level up per se, but you do gain upgrades by spending money and finding things in the world like old school platformers. But regardless, what's here is still insanely good, and Silksong looks like the original game, but it went Super Saiyan. There was even another game called Eterna Lucius, which also ran away from their release date due to Silksong as well, as they say here. After the announcement of Silksong, we are fully aware that our game wouldn't have the visibility it deserves. Competing with the phenomenon of that scale would not only be unfair to our team's effort, but also to you, the community, who expect to experience this adventure under the best possible conditions. They continue. We also want to take this opportunity to thank Team Cherry. There's no need to wish them luck. We know Silksong will be a success and a masterpiece. Instead of rivalry, what we feel is gratitude. Thanks to them, the Metroidvania genre is more alive than ever, and in fact, they were one of the main inspirations that led us to create Eterna Noctis and the entire saga now in development. Like, you need to realize just how big this game is going to be, that all of your competition is effectively just leaving the stage and saying, here, you guys got this, just go ahead, do what you gotta do, and just let them have their moment. Silksong is easily going to break 1 million in sales upon release, I bet, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it breaks probably 2 million copies sold in like 3 days. I'm honestly probably underselling this game if I'm being real with you, but in another twist, the game won't have reviews available at launch either. Which may seem bad at first, but Team Cherry says they felt if they did that, it would be unfair to the Kickstarter backers if they weren't able to play Silksong, but the reviewers could despite financially supporting the game. Some may find that weird, but the fact that it's Team Cherry, I think it's totally fine. Their pedigree is solid for having Hollow Knight run beautifully since day one, so Silksong is likely going to be the very same. But what interests me about Silksong is seeing how the industry reacted to it finally being released. It was like a shark being dropped into a pond full of small fish. It's kind of exactly how GTA 6 is going to go down once that finally drops too, and it's just incredible to see something get announced and then immediately cause everyone else to pivot and change plans. But Silksong is an anomaly in more ways than one. Not only will it likely work incredibly well at release, but it will also be way less than a normal AAA game in price, and unfortunately, the rest of the industry could probably learn a thing or two from Team Cherry. Considering, in case you don't know, there are some very high-profile games coming to Switch 2 in particular in the future. And according to reports, they run like absolute dog water, especially in handheld mode. For example, Elden Ring has been making waves recently for all of the wrong reasons, as seen here from Nintendo Life. Elden Ring Switch 2 footage has leaked online, and it all comes from this user on YouTube named MDE14 who filmed the game while at a fan event in Canada. Elden Ring runs, according to news websites that have also played it, like absolute dog water on Switch 2. For example, at Polygon, they said the game just flat out looks terrible. IGN was even more scathing, where they just called Elden Ring on Switch 2 a total mess. Apparently, it's locked to 30 frames per second, and also in handheld mode, the game is largely just unplayable. Again, comparing how these games are running compared to how indie games tend to do it like Silksong, it worries me. Sure, people will say Elden Ring and Silksong are completely different beasts in terms of, raw graphical fidelity, scope, and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it's more so that I'm just tired of games, regardless of size or scope, simply not working when people are intended to pay a lot of money for these ports either way. It's not just Elden Ring either. Borderlands was also recorded by that same user at a fan expo again. And while it looks mostly okay to play in docked mode, according to reports from like mynintendonews.com, Borderlands 4 is running horribly too. As this user said here who played it on Switch 2, Borderlands 4 can barely keep even 30 frames per second with only just 4 enemies on screen. Which is, beyond worrying considering this game is also not going to be cheap at release. And what is more insulting is that these publishers believe that these games were in a playable enough state that it would be fine to showcase to players prior to their full releases and not think that people wouldn't start talking about it. Borderlands 4 on Switch 2 in Canada retails at $90, which is a staggering amount to pay for a game that is going to be objectively worse on that platform when compared to others. Nintendo in general just overcharges for everything these days. For example, as seen here, you can get Tears of the Kingdom on Switch 2 for the low price of $114 Canadian, and that's before taxes. Wow, what a steal! You could buy almost 10 copies of Hollow Knight right now for the price of that one game. This is what I'm saying, and why Silksong is so important. It's going to be a game that does do gangbusters, but Silksong will also not be full price. Currently, as this video going live anyways, we don't know the price of Silksong yet, but most people assume on the higher end that Silksong will probably retail somewhere near $25, maybe $30 maximum. Which even then, that will still be an absolute steal given what's on offer here. Yes, routinely the game industry this year has been clearly getting outdone by much, much smaller teams that are making games that also cost less to make, but also cost less to buy too. Clair Obscur, which many think will win Game of the Year, retailed for $50 at release. Yet it had more content and polish than the best AAA games in the past 5 years and then some. Despite this though, Clair Obscur sold like crazy and became a success. As GameIndustry.biz showed in their interview with Sandfall, which made Expedition 33 by the way, they won't be selling the company anytime soon to be acquired, and size-wise, they're going to keep the team about the same for their next game too. It's just like Team Cherry with Silksong. They made Hollow Knight with a handful of employees at best, as it was said here during development of Hollow Knight. Team Cherry kept costs low by cutting back on literally everything. And even after the game sold 2.8 million copies in its debut, which was still insane, it then skyrocketed past 10 million copies when Silksong got announced, with the first game now at over 12 million units sold and then some. So it's clear that video games don't have to be these big mega blockbuster $300 million productions. And actually, the best games are often the ones that are just simple, that rely more on gameplay innovation or their writing than that of shiny production values. It feels as though Nintendo specifically also has lost sight of what games like Silksong were all about. Since Silksong is very much like Super Mario back in the day, these games were not about breaking your wallet or even the minds of the developers that were making it. Silksong has already been very well documented that Team Cherry did not crunch at all on this game, which is also why it took 6 years to make, because instead of suffering while making the game like many do in AAA, as it's shown here, Team Cherry instead had fun making Silksong. They never crunched on it, they never tired themselves out. And instead, they just took their time making it as a labor of love. As the creator said in an interview about why Silksong took so long, as it reads here, it was never stuck or anything. It was always progressing. It's just the case that we're a small team and games take a lot of time. There wasn't any big controversial moment behind it. We've been having fun, and it's nice to make fun things. And that's great to hear. I wish that was a more common feeling in game development, but we all know that isn't true. I really can't imagine the people porting Elden Ring or Borderlands right now are having much fun knowing that they're likely getting roasted for those ports, but it's likely not their fault, but instead the Switch 2's hardware. Even Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is a 5-year-old PS4 game, can only hit 40 frames on Switch 2. It's as if the Switch 2 is just, I don't know, holding games back while also demanding loads of money just so that you can play these like subpar versions of these similar experiences that you can play elsewhere that both look and run much better. But what I do hope with games like Clair Obscur and the imminent Silksong is that they show the games industry that you don't need to slave away with teams of hundreds in order to make these games a reality. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I've long since given up on caring about graphical fidelity or anything like that. I've reached the point where, sure, it's nice if something looks great, but if that beautiful vista comes at the cost of performance and stability, it's not really worth it to me. With the Switch 2 and how backwards everything is with that system and its design philosophy, not to mention its monetization, it's not really surprising that the games people are looking forward to the most are not the ones that cost $80 American or over $100 if you're in Canada. Like, look at that, Jesus. But instead, they want these smaller indie titles that are clearly just made with passion first. Hollow Knight Silksong will release, and it won't have a battle pass or always online requirements. It'll just simply be a video game first that just looks to make people smile and have fun. And honestly, there's something beautiful in that. I do wish and hope the industry learns the right lessons from Silksong's release, as well as Clair Obscur's success too, which is that people aren't really looking for that, AAA bombastic game experience as much anymore. AA or indie is really where the magic is at, and it's no wonder why these sorts of games continue to impress. Not to mention how many other developers that work in AAA these days are leaving AAA to go work in indie because of how much more easier it is for them. And they're not worried about making profits while also not robbing the developers behind these games of their souls and keeping them from their families because a deadline needs to be hit. There's just something great there. There's a lesson. I do hope that Silksong forces a reset of some kind for the industry. Because I know the Call of Duties and whatnot out there will just keep trudging along no matter what, releasing new ones every single year. But I think the game of the year this year anyways will come down to 2 games. And those games were not made by a billion-dollar corporation that eats other companies and spits out their bones when they don't hit sales targets, or forces crossover bundles that cost more than the entirety of Hollow Knight so that you can be like a Ninja Turtle in a shooting game. Instead, Game of the Year will most likely be between a French studio, who made a game about a group of survivors facing an unimaginable threat, and another game where a small hornet wearing a red dress wielding a needle as it runs through a kingdom of bugs that looks like it could probably run on a computer from like 15 years ago with zero problems. And I think the gaming industry has a lot of itself backwards right now. But we also need to put our money where our mouths are too. These Switch 2 ports were just an excuse for me to show you guys how the industry is just still, they're just not learning from their mistakes while still asking for the world from you for them. I truly do hope that Silksong, when it finally releases upon every major gaming platform soon, while asking a fraction of what these other games ask of you money-wise, shows the industry that just because you have some Hollywood actor in your game or enough store bundles to throw someone into debt doesn't mean that you have a good game on your hands. Sometimes it's just as simple as reminding people of what they loved about video games in the first place. Like jumping and running and fighting little bugs as a bug yourself while goofy characters sing and dance in the background. Hopefully Silksong makes people remember this, and until they do, their mistakes will just continue to fester and repeat until we all just, until the world blows up, I guess. I don't know. But what do you guys think? Has the industry lost sight of what really matters, and will you be buying Silksong when it releases? And as always, thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.